found them very valuable. So let me share these 3 tenets of tyranny with you. And actually, they're each based on Scripture. So I need, 4 volunteers to read a passage of Scripture. Actually, some of it might be memorized. Romans 3:23. Who'd like to read Romans 3:23? Somebody read? Great, okay. If you read Romans 3:23. Jeremiah 17, verse 9. Jeremiah 17:9. Who'd like to read that? You have a volunteer to read that? Jeremiah 17:9? Thank you. And then Matthew 7:12. Matthew 7:12, thank you. And then finally, James chapter 4, verse 7. James 4, verse 7. Who would read that for me? Another volunteer to read James 4 and verse 7? Okay, thank you very much. So the first one, Romans 3:23. Go ahead and read that.
All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
Okay. And the first tenet of tyranny ties into this, that all have sinned, and therefore any power that can be abused will be abused. You can be sure of that. If somebody is granted power, it is very, very, very likely that they're going to abuse the power that's been granted to them. The second tenet that relates to Jeremiah 17 and verse 9. Jeremiah 17:9. And because the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, abuse always expands to fill the limits of resistance to it. That is, if a tyrant begins to abuse his powers, he is not going to stop expanding the abuse of his powers until he meets resistance. And it's only when he meets resistance that expanse of his abuse will come to a stop temporarily, because if the resistance lets itself down, it's going to expand even further. The third ties into 2 biblical principles. Matthew 7 and verse 12. Matthew 7, verse 12.
Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets.
Okay, the golden rule. In addition to that, James 4 and verse 7.
Submit yourselves to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you.
So we're to love our neighbors as ourselves, as the golden rule says, but also we're to resist Satan. And the third tenet of tyranny says, if people don't resist the abuses of others, that is my neighbor, I see my neighbor's God-given rights being abused, then we will have no one to resist the abuses of ourselves, and tyranny will prevail. In Nazi Germany, there was a pastor, Martin Niemöller, who testified to this. They came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't protest, I didn't put up any fight. And they came for the communists, and I wasn't a communist, and then they came for the Union Party, and all on. And when they came for me, there was nobody left. And so he went out in the concentration camp, because he did not stand, and other Christians in Germany did not stand against the tyrannical abuse of Adolf Hitler. Well, these 3 tenets of tyranny are important to remember, particularly as we look at what the jury is supposed to do. The jury is supposed to resist the tyranny of our government and prevent our government from becoming tyrannical in the first place. When we look at what our founders clearly declared in the Declaration of Independence about this fancy-dressed man here, who was one of the most powerful men in the world of his day, King George III, they said, when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. They looked at the plan of King George III. They looked at the actions of King George III. They said, he has one goal, to reduce us under absolute despotism. It is their right, that is, we the people. It is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. It's not just a matter of saying, well, we're comfortable with this. And sadly, a lot of Americans are comfortable with tyranny. They're willing to have the chains added and more added. And we should not, it is our duty, our founders said, not to permit that to happen. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, that is, taking powers that do not belong to him, and having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. They knew what he was up to. And then they said, the prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. They took the law of God, they compared it with what the king was doing in violation of their rights, and they said, this man is not fit to be the ruler of a free people. When we look at the situation in our country today, as I said, we are under a tyrannical system. And that tyrannical system, one major element of it is the judiciary. And the judiciary that's way outside of its bounds, who's usurped powers that are not its own. Many Americans think the judiciary is basically the final arbiter of what is legal, what is law in America. But our founders, For example, Thomas Jefferson warned us never to put the judiciary in a position of being the final arbiter of what is law and what is just. He wrote in his letter to William Jarvis, 1820, "You seem to consider the judges as the ultimate arbiters of all constitutional questions. A very dangerous doctrine indeed, and one which would place us under the despotism of an oligarchy." And that is what we are in today. Most Americans accept it. So, hey, the judges ruled this, or, they passed Roe v. Wade, and therefore Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. How many times have you heard that phrase, the law of the land? Of course it's the law of the land. Why? Well, the judges ruled this way, therefore it's the law of the land. No, it's not. As a matter of fact, our founders said, no way should you permit the judges to be in a position to be the ultimate arbiters of what is right and wrong in constitutional questions. He said our judges are honest as other men, and not more so, and their power is more dangerous as they are in office for life and not responsible as the other functionaries are to elect and control. The only way you can remove them is by impeachment. Much easier to remove a senator, a congressman, a president, a governor than it is to remove a judge. The Constitution has erected no such single tribunal, knowing that to whatever hands confided, with corruptions of time and party, its members would become despots. And that's what we have. That's what happened to Terry Schiavo, a lowly judge on the lowest level of Florida's judicial system, a probate judge, one who decides the issues of a state and those kind of things. That probate judge determined that Terry Schiavo did not have the right to life, and he sought that she was judicially murdered. The Congress of the United States tried to weigh in unsuccessfully. All sorts of governmental agencies, the governor of Florida tried to weigh in, but this lowly probate judge, on the lowest level of the judiciary, was able to judicially murder Terry Schiavo. Why? Because all the other government agencies says, oh, he's a judge. We can't do anything. He's a judge. Well, whatever he renders is final law, and we are helpless under the thumb of these black-robed despots, or like what some friends call them, black-robed, or black tyrants in black dresses. And perhaps there's some truth to that. Well, our founders gave us a formula. 3 different essential elements to prevent this kind of tyranny from happening, particularly tyranny from the judiciary. The first, of course, everyone has heard about, the basic checks and balance between the 3 branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial. Most people know about that, but most people don't know that they also designed the 4 levels of government to prevent a monopoly of government by separation of power between federal, state, county, and local. And particularly, the balance of power between the state and the federal government was to always be in favor of the state governments. If you have a monopoly in any business, you know that you're not going to get good service, you're not going to have a good price, you're going to have the worst of all worlds. And you see this whenever government also has a monopoly. You see, the federal government is a monopoly, which is why it was designed by the Constitution to have very few restricted powers. The state governments are to have wide-ranging powers dealing with all issues of life, liberty, property, and so on for the citizens. Therefore, if you are unhappy with your state, say the state of Ohio passed some egregious laws that you were just, outraged by, they don't have a monopoly on you. You as a citizen can pick up your bag and say, sorry, Ohio, you're going to lose me as a citizen of your state. I'm moving to Indiana. I've had it with this state. They don't have the kind of monopoly power over the citizens that the federal government does. And so if you give the federal government enormous powers to oppress the people, where do we go? I mean, we can't move to Canada. That's even worse, or Mexico. We don't have an option. And our founders wisely gave the balance of powers between the 4 levels of government to prevent that kind of monopoly. And their structure was wise. Each one of these boxes is a check. The governor can be a check against the president and against the senators and representatives and so on. Each element of these 4 levels can be a check against the level above it. Thirdly, however, and this again is what this course is designed to restore in our country, the third and perhaps the most unknown aspect today is that the jury was to be the final check against government tyranny, an independent jury. That is a jury able to think for itself, a jury able to analyze a law and measure that law against God's law, and measure that law against the Constitution of the United States, against the Constitution of their own state. An independent jury can check a tyrannical government's power And as we have said, the duty of the jury is to do just that, to judge the law as well as the facts in order to defend our constitutional republic. And that is exactly what our founders said. The anchor of a free government is that kind of independent jury that can judge the law and the facts.